the late 1990s, the world was invited to bid on the unfinished hull of a massive Soviet aircraft carrier. The asking price was a cool $20 million. The reported winning bidder was a small, unknown company from Macau with a grand vision to transform the 67,500-ton steel behemoth into the world's largest floating hotel and casino. It was a bizarre, almost comical plan. A floating palace of pleasure built on the bones of a Cold War Leviathan. The thing is, almost every part of that story was a lie. This wasn't a gamble on entertainment. It was one of the most audacious and successful deceptions in modern military history. And the prize wasn't a casino jackpot, but the key to unlocking a new era of global sea power. This is the unbelievable story of the ghost ship that became the Liaoning, China's first aircraft carrier. The story begins not in China, but in the sprawling shipyards of Mykolaiv, in what was then the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Here, in the final, sputtering years of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was pouring its resources into a new class of warship. They weren't just aircraft carriers. They were designated as Тяжелые авианосущие крейсеры, or heavy aircraft-carrying cruisers. This was a uniquely Soviet concept. A hybrid designed to comply with treaties that restricted carrier passage through certain straits. These ships were built to fight their own battles, armed to the teeth with massive anti-ship missiles in addition to their air wing. The lead ship of this new line was the Admiral Kuznetsov. Its younger sister, laid down in 1985, was named the Riga, and later renamed the Varyag. The Varyag was an absolute monster of naval engineering. Stretching over 1,000 feet, 300 meters in length, it was designed to displace tens of thousands of tons and project Soviet power across the globe. Unlike American carriers with their powerful steam catapults, the Kuznetsov class used a ski jump ramp at the bow. This elegantly simple, upward curving ramp would allow jets to take off under their own power, converting their forward momentum into vertical lift. It was less efficient than a catapult, limiting aircraft takeoff weight and fuel load, but it was mechanically simpler and more reliable. The ship's belly was designed to hold a formidable air wing of Sukhoi Su-33 and Mikoyan MiG-29K fighters alongside helicopters, and lining its forward deck were 12 massive vertical launch tubes for P-700 Granite anti-ship missiles, each one capable of carrying a conventional or nuclear warhead. The Varyag was a fortress, a cruiser, and an airfield, all welded into one intimidating package. But it was a package that would never be delivered. In 1991, the music stopped. The Soviet Union dissolved, and the Varyag, then about 70% complete, became a geopolitical orphan. It was physically located in the newly independent Ukraine, but Russia claimed ownership as the USSR's successor state. Ukraine, however, owned the shipyard and the physical hull itself. A bitter tug-of-war ensued. Russia, crippled by economic chaos, couldn't afford to buy the ship from Ukraine and finish it. Ukraine, a new nation with a Black Sea fleet but no blue water ambitions, had absolutely no use for a half-built supercarrier and no money to complete or maintain it. So the Varyag sat and sat for years. Its bare red oxide primer hull was lashed to a pier in Mykolaiv, a silent, rusting testament to a fallen empire. Its engines had never been installed. Its rudders were missing. Its sophisticated electronics and weapon systems were just empty spaces and dangling wires. It was a ghost ship, a relic destined, it seemed, for the scrapyard. Ukraine eventually stripped it of whatever equipment it could and put the empty hulk up for sale in 1998. The world watched, wondering who would buy this useless, expensive piece of scrap metal. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the People's Republic of China was watching with intense interest. For decades, Chinese military planners had dreamed of possessing an aircraft carrier. They saw it not just as a weapon, but as the ultimate symbol of great power status. A nation with a carrier could project its influence far beyond its own shores, protecting trade routes, asserting territorial claims, and joining the exclusive club of global naval powers. Their quest had been long and frustrating. They had purchased several retired, junked carriers from other nations just to study them. There was the Australian HMAS Melbourne, an old British Majestic-class carrier, which they bought for scrap in 1985. They spent years meticulously taking it apart, reverse engineering its steam catapult and landing systems. Then came the Soviet carriers Minsk and Kiev, which they purchased in the 1990s and, in a brilliant piece of misdirection, turned into theme parks and tourist attractions. All the while, their engineers were crawling through every corridor, studying every weld, learning everything they could about carrier design. But these were old ships, museum pieces. The Varyag was different. It was modern, it was massive, and though incomplete, it was a nearly new hull. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. But acquiring it wouldn't be easy. China couldn't just openly buy a warship of this magnitude. The international political fallout, especially from the United States, would be immense. It would be seen as a hugely aggressive move, setting off alarm bells across Asia and beyond. They needed a cover story, a plausible front that would allow them to secure the ship without revealing their true intentions. And that's where things get strange. The winning bidder for the Varyag was a little-known entity called the Chon Lot Travel Agency Limited, based in the gambling enclave of Macau. The man behind it was Xu Zhengping, a wealthy Chinese businessman and, conveniently, a former officer in the People's Liberation Army. Xu's official plan was audacious to the point of being almost unbelievable. He claimed his company would tow the Varyag to Macau and convert it into a floating entertainment complex, complete with a luxury hotel and, of course, a massive casino. To sell the story, he produced elaborate architectural plans and secured the necessary and very expensive gambling licenses from Macau. He told Ukrainian officials that the ship would never again be used for military purposes. He even had to convince them that Macau had a port deep enough to accommodate the colossal vessel, which it did not. He was a master showman, armed with a seemingly bottomless supply of liquor for negotiating and enough cash to make the problem go away. In 1999, the deal was done. The rusting hulk of the Varyag was sold to the casino developer for $20 million. It was one of the greatest bargains and one of the greatest bluffs in military history. The People's Liberation Army Navy, or PLAN, had its ship. Now they just had to get it home. The journey from the Black Sea to China would prove to be an epic saga in itself, a diplomatic and logistical nightmare that would take nearly 2 years. The first and biggest obstacle was the Bosphorus Strait. This narrow, winding waterway runs right through the heart of Istanbul, Turkey, and is the only maritime exit from the Black Sea. Under the Montreux Convention, Turkey controls the strait and has the right to deny passage to aircraft carriers belonging to Black Sea powers, with some exceptions. The Varyag was now a powerless, unpropelled commercial hulk, but Turkey wasn't buying it. They knew exactly what this ship was and who it was really for. Citing immense safety risks, the rudderless, engineless carrier breaking loose and smashing into one of Istanbul's historic bridges, and under significant political pressure from the United States and its allies, Turkey refused passage. For 16 long months, the Varyag was anchored in the Black Sea, just outside the strait, a pawn in a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. A team of Chinese diplomats descended on Ankara, engaging in intense, protracted negotiations. The standoff became a national issue in China, a source of frustration and perceived humiliation. Finally, a breakthrough came. China offered a massive package of economic aid and tourism to Turkey and agreed to pay a $1 billion bond as collateral against any potential damage. They also hired the world's best tugboat operators to ensure a safe passage. In November 2001, Turkish authorities finally relented. Watched by the entire world, the Varyag was carefully guided by a convoy of 11 tugboats and 12 pilot vessels through the treacherous Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits. But its ordeal was far from over. After clearing the straits, the ship was battered by a severe Force 9 gale in the Aegean Sea. The tow lines snapped, and the colossal hulk was set adrift, swinging wildly in the storm, threatening Greek islands. It took a heroic effort by the tug crews, including one sailor who lost his life in the attempt, to bring the carrier back under control. From there, the journey continued. Through the Suez Canal, across the Indian Ocean, through the Strait of Malacca, and into the South China Sea. Finally, on March 3, 2002, after a grueling journey of 15,200 nautical miles, 28,200 kilometers, that had lasted well over a year, the weary hulk of the Varyag was nudged into a dry dock in the northern Chinese port city of Dalian. The shell game was over. The odyssey was complete. The real work was about to begin. The ship that arrived in Dalian was a shadow of a warship. It was an empty shell, a blank canvas. This was, in many ways, exactly what the plan wanted. They didn't just want to finish a Soviet carrier, they wanted to build a Chinese one. The Dalian shipyard became the site of one of the most ambitious reverse engineering and shipbuilding projects in history. For the better part of a decade, the Varyag was shrouded in secrecy, hidden under massive tarps and scaffolding. Thousands of engineers, technicians, and laborers swarmed over it. Their first task was a forensic analysis. They studied every inch of the ship, from the metallurgy of its hull to the layout of its internal compartments. The original Soviet plans that came with the ship were incomplete, so they had to create their own. They were learning, absorbing decades of Soviet carrier design philosophy in a compressed time frame. Then came the rebuild. The entire ship was sandblasted down to bare metal to treat years of corrosion. New Chinese-made steam turbine propulsion systems were installed, finally giving the ship a heart. The empty voids for electronics were filled with state-of-the-art Chinese systems. New surface search radars, air traffic control radars, and sophisticated combat management systems. One of the most significant structural changes involved the forward deck. The plan decided to remove the 12 huge P-700 granite anti-ship missile silos, a hallmark of the original Soviet design. This was a crucial decision. It signaled a shift in doctrine away from the Soviet heavy aircraft-carrying cruiser concept and towards a more traditional carrier role focused purely on aviation. Removing the silos freed up an enormous amount of internal volume, which was repurposed to create more hangar space for aircraft and more room for fuel and munitions, increasing the ship's endurance and combat power. The exterior was transformed as well. The island superstructure was rebuilt with new sensor arrays. The flight deck was coated with a new heat-resistant, non-slip surface, and a whole suite of defensive weaponry was installed. This included multiple Type 1130 close-in weapon systems, fearsome Gatling-style cannons capable of firing up to 11,000 rounds per minute to shred incoming missiles and aircraft. It was also armed with short-range surface-to-air missile launchers. The ship was no longer a helpless hulk. It was becoming a well-defended fortress. While the hardware was coming together, China was tackling an even bigger challenge, creating a carrier air wing from scratch. The fighter chosen for this role was the Shenyang J-15, also known as the Flying Shark. This aircraft has a controversial history of its own. It is a direct, unlicensed copy of the Soviet Sukhoi Su-33, the same type of plane designed to fly from the Varyag in the first place. China had acquired an Su-33 prototype from Ukraine and painstakingly reverse-engineered it. The result was a heavy, twin-engine, multi-role fighter capable of air-to-air combat and ground attack, specifically strengthened for the brutal physics of carrier landings. The transformation was nearly complete. On September 25, 2012, more than a decade after it arrived in China as a derelict hulk, the ship was officially commissioned into the People's Liberation Army Navy. It was given a new name, Liaoning, in honor of the province where it was reborn. It was assigned the hull number 16. The former Varyag was now a Chinese warship, the pride of the plan. The Liaoning is an impressive vessel. It displaces around 60,000 tons fully loaded, is just over 1,000 feet, 305 meters long, and can reach speeds in excess of 30 knots. Its air wing is typically composed of around 24 J-15 Flying Shark fighters, along with a mix of helicopters for anti-submarine warfare, search and rescue, and airborne early warning. Its defining feature remains the ski jump ramp. This system, known as short takeoff, barrier-arrested recovery, or STOBAR, is both a strength and a weakness. The short takeoff is simple and effective, but it means the J-15s cannot launch with their maximum payload of fuel and weapons. This limits their combat radius and striking power compared to aircraft launched from a catapult. For landing, the Liaoning uses a traditional arrestor wire system. 4 heavy steel cables are stretched across the angled landing area of the deck. Pilots must snag one of these wires with a tailhook on their aircraft to come to a violent, gut-wrenching stop in just a few hundred feet. It's considered one of the most difficult and dangerous feats in all of aviation, a controlled crash every single time. From the very beginning, China made it clear that the Liaoning's primary role was not as a frontline combat vessel, but as a training and research platform. It is a schoolhouse, the cradle of Chinese naval aviation. On its flight deck, the plan is writing its own textbooks on carrier operations. Every launch, every recovery, every drill is a lesson. Pilots, known as deck angels, are learning the intricate and deadly ballet of managing a crowded and chaotic flight deck. Engineers are learning how to maintain complex aircraft in a harsh maritime environment. Commanders are learning how to lead a carrier strike group, the complex flotilla of destroyers, frigates, and submarines that protects the carrier and supports its mission. Key milestones came quickly. In November 2012, just 2 months after commissioning, the first successful J-15 landing and takeoff from the Liaoning took place, a moment of immense national pride. Since then, the Liaoning, often accompanied by its strike group, has ventured further from Chinese shores, conducting exercises in the South China Sea and sailing into the Western Pacific, signaling its growing operational confidence. The strategic impact of the Liaoning cannot be overstated. For China, it is far more than just a single warship. It is a powerful symbol of the nation's rise as a major military and economic power. It represents a fundamental shift in the plan's doctrine, from a coastal defense force to a true blue water navy capable of sustained operations far from home. The Liaoning allows China to project power in ways it never could before, to protect its vital sea lanes of communication, and to more forcefully assert its controversial territorial claims in regions like the South China Sea. But perhaps the Liaoning's most important legacy is the knowledge it has provided. It was a stepping stone, a colossal learning aid. The decade-long process of rebuilding the ship and the subsequent years of operating it have given China an invaluable education in carrier design, construction, and operation. This hard-won experience was applied directly to the construction of China's first entirely domestically built carrier, the Shandong. Launched in 2017, the Shandong is a modified copy of the Liaoning's design, but with numerous improvements based on lessons learned. And it doesn't stop there. The knowledge base created by the Liaoning project has culminated in the Fujian, China's third and most advanced carrier. The Fujian is a true supercarrier, featuring a flat-top design with electromagnetic catapults, a technology that puts it in the same league as America's Ford-class carriers. None of this would have been possible without the long, arduous journey of that rusting hulk from Ukraine. Of course, the Liaoning has its limitations. Its Soviet-era design, conventional propulsion, and reliance on a ski jump for launching aircraft mean it is not a direct match for a Nimitz or Ford-class nuclear-powered supercarrier of the United States Navy. An American carrier can carry more aircraft, launch them more quickly with heavier loads, and stay at sea indefinitely without refueling. But comparing the Liaoning to an American supercarrier misses the point. The Liaoning was never meant to go one-on-one with the U.S. Navy. Its purpose was to break China into the carrier club, to build an entire generation of naval aviators and support crew from zero, and to serve as a blueprint for the future. In this, it has been an unqualified, spectacular success. The story of the Liaoning is a testament to patience, ingenuity, and strategic foresight. It's the story of how a nation played the long game, turning a forgotten relic of a dead empire into the cornerstone of its future ambitions. The floating casino that was never meant to be became something far more significant, the ship that launched a superpower's navy into the 21st century. What started as a joke, a bizarre cover story about a floating casino, has fundamentally reshaped naval strategy in the Pacific. The Liaoning proved that, with enough determination and resources, you can turn another nation's scrap into your own strategic treasure. And, as its more advanced successors roll out of Chinese shipyards, the world is now watching to see what the next chapter holds. If you found this journey through modern naval history as fascinating as we did, consider subscribing to the channel. We're always digging into the stories behind the world's most incredible military hardware, and you won't want to miss what's next. We also want your mission briefings. What piece of military history, legendary machine, or untold story should we investigate next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. Your idea could become our next feature documentary. Thanks for watching.